Hi there. How do you like my backdrop? It's kind of like Easter in 1970 or 1980. But today's topic is going to be biological weapons. Is what I'm going to go over. I'm going to go over biological weapons. So when the coronavirus pandemic began, I was in Vietnam, and I came to Japan, and I came to the States. It was really difficult times, and I don't want to go into full detail about it, but other than uh, I know what country made it. The countries that designed the biological weapon, the coronavirus, what they did was they used a horseshoe bat, other bats, and what they do is with the bat they did what's called it, it's called acceleration, virus acceleration, contamination, lethality acceleration experiments they were doing on the bat. Gain of function studies is the word I'm looking for. So they were doing gain of function studies on the bat when it happened, and they were doing gain of function studies with the coronavirus. That's a fact. But they like to hide it, they like to bury it, and they like to ignore it. And it was in a BL4 laboratory. So anytime you're dealing with legal pathogens, you have to have a BL4 lab, or otherwise everybody's going to get infected. So a BL4 laboratory. BL4 laboratory, you wear a full body suit. Don't ask me how I know this. But you wear a full body suit with the oxygen feed into the suit. And what it does is it creates positive pressure in your suit. So that means the pressure in your suit, you have to put on the suit, and then you duct tape your sleeves and all that, and rubber booties and all that stuff. I mean, and so you have to be in a BL4 lab, and then you have to have the right protection equipment. So you have like it looks like an astronaut suit, so you're covered, your complete face is covered, your whole body is covered, and you're given an oxygen feed. So that means that you're fed oxygen into the suit, and it's positive pressure. So what it does is it's a stronger pressure than the atmospheric pressure. So our atmosphere we live in has a certain pressure. Then when in a specialized condition, like underneath the water, of course, the atmospheric pressure is going to be a lot higher because you have the weight of the water on top of it. So um, with the suits and with the BL4 lab, you need the correct wear dress when you're dealing with that pathogen. And so um, you need a positive pressure suit. I've said that like 4 times. You need that. You need gloves. And you need different sections of areas of decontamination for a BL4 lab to experiment with pathogens. So you need like an area where you store the organisms, and then an area where I could just spend too much time talking about that, but they have an incinerator, so they would destroy if they have a pathogen that they're finished playing with or whatever. They usually put it in formaldehyde or a chemical similar, and they incinerate it. Formaldehyde basically destroys uh, everything or whatever, pathogens or whatever. So I was there in the beginning of the biological weapon breakout, coronavirus, which is in fact a biological weapon. They're going to try to, they denied it for years, and there's still controversy. Scientists say natural, blah, 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 blah. But there's other natural pathogens that they experiment with, or viruses, or whatever you want to call it, for gain of function studies. So Google gain and functional studies in coronavirus and see what you come up with. You might find some interesting advice or material or facts there. But anyways, the reason why I'm so interested in biological weapons is because I've been infected with 3 or 4. And so once coronavirus began, I became this isolated, paranoid old guy once I knew what it was. And, at first they didn't know what it was, but once they knew what it was, I was so freaking angry. There I am, isolated, shut off from the world. It made me so angry. I was angry for a year straight almost. On everything I'd read about it, how they distort the facts about the coronavirus, how it spread, the lethality of it. I met this one guy from Italy, I don't know, 4 months ago, and he was in his 30s, and he was a healthy looking guy. He looked like the least person you would expect. He was a healthy guy. He's in his 30s, right? And he was in Italy when it happened. And he got the coronavirus. And you'd see those pictures of people in oxygen tents where they're in a sealed off tent and they're getting an oxygen feed so they can breathe because their lungs are full of fluid. It's called a cyclone storm. So a cyclonic storm is where your immune system starts attacking itself, and so your lungs fill up with liquid. I mean, there's other things that happen too. So this guy was in his 30s and he had it, and for some reason we ended up talking about that subject, and he spent a month in a tent in his 30s. So tell me it wasn't lethal. A lot of people died. I got vaccinated. As soon as that vaccine came out, I was, when they first came out the vaccine, I was in the States. I drove from one state to get the first shot, and then I drove, because there's a certain period of time in between the shots for the effectiveness, and I got the Moderna. I got the first shot, and then I went to a different state because it was difficult scheduling shots. They had a shortage of vaccines. So I drove all the way to a different state to get the second shot. And then, the third shot there. Then I went to another country after that, and the doors opened up, the borders opened up. I could go on and on about my story, but I was just really, really angry because I knew it was a biological weapon. Now, did I know it was going to happen before it happened? Yes. Yes, I just didn't know when and where. But I knew that we were going to have, I didn't think it would be in my lifetime. I just thought there's odds or statistics. So since I'm an engineer, I'm thinking odds and statistics on things. And so I'm thinking, well, every few hundred years they have a nasty breakout. So there was a Spanish flu, but it didn't begin in Spain. It's just that they were allowed to advertise about it or whatnot, And the Spanish flu killed off more people than everybody in World War II combined. So it killed off Spanish flu, which came from the middle of America on a farm, was the source of origin, far as they know. Um, that might have been a natural situation, and it wasn't deliberately a pathogen being accelerated. But anyways, like I said, gain of function. So um, they the Spanish flu wiped out a lot of people. You can Google that one. Then they have the Black Plague. You guys have probably heard of that. Um, and that came from fleas spreading a virus. Then they have malaria. That comes from mosquitoes. They still have that. They haven't cured that. They talk about how great all these modern inventions are in medicine and everything, and they still haven't found a cure for malaria yet. So they've been messing around with mosquitoes and deliberately bioengineering them to make them different. They've been playing around with it, and that could backfire on them and all that stuff. And so you can get dengue, you can get like the most lethal animal in the world is a mosquito. And they're amazing animals. Like they know to go indoors in the winter and hide or kind of like hibernate or breed, but they don't live past 30 to 60 days, and they've been around for billions of years. So, um, to me, the mosquito is a flying hypodermic needle, so it can spread pathogens. Then the second animal that's been experimented with and deliberately altered for gain of function studies is a tick. So this type of tick normally is aggressive to begin with. Like if you're 10 feet away or whatever, it'll come after you. So how these uh, bugs find the human is the mosquito in particular. There's two different types. There's a day biter and there's a night biter. So the night biters will have their, you can Google it all if you want to really look it up. But there, if you see one, it'll be parked on the wall and it'll have its two rear legs up in the air. So that's the night biter. The day biters are like a tiger mosquito, they call it. When they have different, they're black and white, is their camouflage or look. And then they don't like the heat. So most mosquitoes don't like the heat. That's why they come out at dusk or in the morning, or they're night biters like the one I'm talking about. And so they usually, like in the daytime, the day biters, if you're going close to bushes, they hide underneath the leaves and then they'll fly out and get you. And then in residential housing, I remember one time I was in Bangkok, Thailand, and I just had this gut instinct to, to completely go through the apartment that we were staying at the time. And I opened up the blinds, the window blinds to outside the curtains, if you will. And I saw this freaking huge mosquito just waiting. Then I've talked to people from Brazil. We talked about malaria. They had some there. And he said that, but they're exercising control, so they're using DDT and all that stuff. So you can get these pathogens from, like why the coronavirus was so lethal is it was highly spreadable in the air. So like someone could be in a room that had it for a couple hours, and then it could leave. They could not even leave. They could leave the room, leave the premises. You could walk in the exact same room and get contaminated from the coronavirus. Then they have anthrax, which they deliberately sent out and has been turned into a biological weapon more so. And they sent some letters. This is quite a while back after 9/11. I forget, there was some people that were really angry, and there was a person that had access to weapons grade anthrax, and they sent out letters, so they contaminated the whole mail system with the anthrax. And anthrax was experimented with as a biological experiment. Some governments did in certain places on certain islands, if you want to look it up, and all that stuff. But anthrax is treatable if you catch it early enough with the right antibiotics. Then the other biological weapon, there's a ton, but the most lethal is botulism, and that comes from a can. If you take a can and you crack it open and then you let it sit for a while, botulism will start growing. That's how you cultivate it. There's other ways. I'm not an expert on it. I can just tell you that a small amount, like a pound, would decimate everybody on the planet if they made it correctly or whatever. As far as weaponized anthrax, how they weaponized it was they made it so that it had a certain weight so that the anthrax would stay in the air longer. So if you opened up a letter that had anthrax in it and you didn't know that you were opening a letter with anthrax in it, by the time you found out, it would probably be too late, like before they dialed it in. So when the coronavirus came out, I knew exactly it was a biological weapon, and I was really, really pissed. It just got under my skin. And a lot of people don't have a clue, but it was. And I took the vaccines willingly. I mean, compared to other stuff I've put in my body, there isn't anything worse that can put in my body than's already been, because I've been exposed to radiation and other stuff. So, I mean, I was thinking, I took the vaccine because, um, yeah, it was crazy times. It's almost like I could just do a whole show on that, just that one thing, but I'll just keep it to biological weapons. So, anthrax, botulism, and then there's Q fever, which I picked up, which almost killed my sister's husband. And they gave him serious brain damage and all that. And in Australia, they developed a vaccine for it. I don't know the effectiveness of it, but you have to have the vaccine for the Q fever before you get it. Q stands for Query. Yeah, so anyways, that's another biological weapon. So is Lyme disease, the other one from ticks. It affects everybody totally differently. Like some people, it becomes debilitating and they can't work the rest of their life. And other people, they don't have as bad of a problem with it. That's transmitted by birds um, and ticks and other things are the vehicles for that. Then acute fever, the one that I was infected with, the last one I was infected with, like I'm having this super high temperature, like I have the flu, right? And this is an area where they've had proven cases of Q fever. People have gotten Q fever from that area. And like they should be in the data, that should be in the database of the computer, you know. So I got the Q fever, and I was just having a skyrocketing temperature and splitting headaches. I had the worst headaches I've ever had in my life to this day. I've had a lot of bad hangovers and withdrawals, but compared to the headaches I had from Q fever, so anyways, uh, they were kind of playing games with me, and they didn't want to run a test on Q fever or any of that stuff. And then they wanted to do a really expensive full body scan. Um, it's like $1,000 for an MRI, or I don't know if it's an MRI or they were going to do the other one to evaluate my body, and all they had to do was test for Q fever, and it was a high Q fever area. So Q fever, I can talk about all kinds of things, like bed bugs. They crawl around. If you travel, you've probably had a problem with bed bugs before. They can live for a year without food, so they can go dormant and not eat for a year and live if they're in the right climate conditions. So back on the Q can live in the soil, just in the dirt, and it only takes one bacterium with Q fever, so it doesn't take like 5 or 10, like maybe coronavirus does, but it just takes one to to infect you with Q fever, and it's highly contagious by airborne. Like, say you're driving past a farm in the Midwest and it's infected and the dust blows on you and that contains Q fever, you can get it. Now, the public stance on it is, oh, it's not that bad. You just get sick for a couple of weeks and you're okay, and it naturally goes away. And most people don't have a problem with it. Q fever isn't a big deal. I say BS on that. I'm calling BS on that totally, because it almost killed my sister's husband. It's almost Q to fill people I know. And then Q fever almost killed me. So, they're downplaying it because they don't want to address it because it would cost a ton of money. So, how do you get Q fever? It can live in the soil for 2 years and still be contagious, maybe longer, but from the studies I know about, you get it from animal feces. So, like a sheep, goat, cow, a different livestock can have Q fever. So it's spread predominantly airborne. It is predominantly how it's spread, but um, and the most with goats, the most contagious phase is when they're milking the goats. If or at birth there's a high amount of virus of the Q fever um, in the placenta. So if you're giving birth to an infected goat, you can pick it up that way. But you can pick it up through the air by breathing soil that's been contaminated with Q fever, and that soil stays contaminated for 2 years. I wonder if they have contracts on real estate where they test for Q fever. I wonder if they have that. They should, because it stays in the air. It stays for 2 years in the soil. So you can get that through the air. You can get that through the milk. You can get that from the meat from the livestock. You can get it from like clothes that were infected with it and infected with the Q fever. You can get it through clothes, um, You can get it through touch. It's a bacterium. You can get it through milk, different types of milk. You can get it from cheese. There's lots of different ways you can get it, and it is, they, I can't say what country, but they were deliberately experimenting it with this as a biological weapon to use in biological warfare. That's Q fever. I had that. So worst case scenario was mine. Didn't go away in 2 weeks. And I had splitting headaches and I had astronomical temperatures like 105, 104, 103. And then once I got on, fortunately, I went to a different country. And the first hospital said, no, 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 you don't have Q fever. You have a, you have coronavirus. And he was adamant about that. And he wouldn't test me for Q fever. I wanted to test for it. So I went to a second hospital and I talked to a professional doctor in Japan that specialized in treating those pathogens, those viruses and diseases. And he was willing to give me a test. I told him the searches, my living circumstances and everything, and how I thought I might have got it. And I remember in the middle of a train ride, I got a call, and I just picked it up quickly and said, I can't talk on the train because you're not supposed to talk on the train. So I got off the train, and he said, you do have Q fever. It's been confirmed. And he said, you need to come back in. You need to get on antibiotics ASAP as soon as you can. He dealt with it like an emergency is what it was too, because of my high temps and all that stuff. Then he said, you're going to be getting a call from the health department. Sure enough, I got a health department. Questions were like, see, with the coronavirus too, you can get it off your cat or your dog or whatever. If they become infected, pets can infect you, infect the owners. Your pet can take you out if they have any of these pathogens. So I had a worst case scenario, Q fever, where it just wasn't going away and it was getting worse. It wasn't a simple 2 weeks disappear. I had to be on antibiotics for quite a while, almost a year. And the antibiotics, they have different side effects, and some people can't take the medication, so they have to try another antibiotic. I was on a combination of 2 antibiotics for Q fever to get rid of that. Okay, so I'm going to finish this off with, since we're getting near the end of the time, is I'm against messing around with these pathogens in BL4 laboratories and doing experiments in that. They say they're doing these experiments all in the name of research to help people. No, a lot of countries are developing it to weaponize it. And then the security level of some of these laboratories is scary. So some of these laboratories, they aren't even BL4s, which is the highest level. They're BL3s and BL2s. So they have them in residential areas, close, small ones, in areas where there's lots of people, and nobody has a clue that there's biological weapons stored down the street. They've been using biological weapons in warfare for millions and millions of years. I can talk about other cases that were way before the Spanish flu they used deliberately as a biological weapon in biological warfare. So that's my take on biological weapons and coronavirus.